Well, while we're waiting, tonight was put on because of Women's Health Week. And one of the key messages from Women's Health Week was that 1 in 5 women are behind schedule on their testing. So it's a good reminder that if you're late on any of your testing, to maybe book in an appointment with the doctor. And what was surprising was 1 in 3 women are actually behind with their dental checkups. So that's also something to consider. And fair enough, with COVID and mask wearing and everything else, the last thing you want is someone in your mouth. But now is a really good time to catch up if you have been behind. But guys, it is 7:30 and we arrived on time, so we might as well get started. So tonight we're going to be talking about minerals for menopause. I'm Jennifer Harrington. I'm a naturopath, I'm a nutritionist, I'm a herbalist, author, podcaster, and perimenopausal woman. So a lot of the symptoms we go through tonight, I've experienced. So I've got some little hints and tricks that have worked for me. So I'll let you know what they are as we go along. But what I wanted to do was to start with a poll, which I just need to send to you guys. Launch, here we go. So I just want to know a little bit more about you because as we go through, some of the minerals work differently at different stages of the transition. So if you can let me know if you are maybe perimenopausal or postmenopausal, or maybe if you're not in the transition, maybe you're here to prepare and to learn, or maybe you're here to support somebody else who is going through it. And if you are in the transition and there's been a couple of problems, please let me know what the most problematic concerns were. And you can click more than one, just so I get an idea as we're going through tonight that I can customize and help you out a little bit with a bit more information. So I can see there's still a few of you answering, so I'll give you a little bit longer. And I'm sorry, with the problems, I could only write 10 options. I certainly know there is far more issues that can happen at this stage of life. But looks like we've got most answers in. Okay, let's have a look and let's share these results. So what we can see is that 8% of you are here for support, which I think is a wonderful thing to do, or maybe you're here learning ready for yourself. That we have 62% of women tonight are in perimenopause. You're in good company with me. And that we have 31% of you in postmenopause. So don't worry, I'll give you information regarding both where I can. And when we look at the possible concerns, like the biggest one tonight seems to be weight, with 62% of women saying that that's where they're struggling. I think the next biggest one would be fatigue at 54%. And then we've got brain fog in at 46%, moods in at 38%, sleep and heat. So with heat, I was thinking hot flushes, night sweats, they're equal in at 32. What I wanted to show you, and I need to get back to sharing my screen, is how common are your symptoms? So previously we had the SWAN study, which was only a sample of about 4,000 women. It was around that number somewhere. But now Evernow has published their research, which was based on 100,000 women. So this is going to give us a better idea of how common some of our symptoms are. And we can see that fatigue and low energy is a concern with 81.5% of women during the transition. But sleep disturbances, it's about 78.6%. Weight changes, well, we would all agree with that from the survey tonight at 78%. Brain fog in there at 75. Hot flashes, well, we call them hot flushes. Hot flash, it's an American company. 70%. Night sweats at 66. Joint and muscle discomfort at 63. Mood changes like anxiety and depression, closer to 62%. Mood swings in there at 59.5. We've got vaginal dryness in there at 57. We've got skin and hair changes at 57. Painful sex at 41. Heart discomfort at 31.8. Issues with facial hair and acne in at 33%. Urgent toilet trips in at 30%, and unusual periods at 17. So one other thing that they found in this study that I thought I should mention tonight was that previously we had thought that the menopausal transition from beginning to end takes about 10 years, where their research, unfortunately, was saying it's potentially closer to a 20-year transition. So hopefully tonight, it's not all going to be about doom and gloom. It's going to be about some some steps that we can take so that we're not experiencing some of these symptoms. But I just wanted to show you that so you can see that it is quite common, but it doesn't make it normal. The menopausal transition is a normal, natural part of life. It was not designed to be this problematic, and we're going to talk about some of this as we go along. So tonight we're going to talk briefly about 6 crucial nutrients. We're going to focus on minerals, obviously. We're going to talk about mineral deficiency, how we replete our minerals, and also some of the core minerals for menopause. And hopefully we've got time at the end for questions. So the 6 crucial nutrients are water, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, and minerals. Now we must consume these, otherwise we have deficiencies. They're all equally as important as each other. You can't say, well, I won't have my vitamins, but I'll have double my minerals. That doesn't work that way. We need them all. So if we're looking at what are minerals, minerals are essential for life. We need to consume them because our body cannot produce them. We can't manufacture them on our own. They are inorganic and they hold on to their chemical form when exposed to the elements. This is where they differentiate from vitamins because vitamins are organic and they actually lose their chemical form when they're exposed to the elements. But we're not going into vitamins tonight. What I want to make sure you understand is that mineral deficiencies can cause suboptimal health and disease. So mineral deficiencies, whenever I look at it, I always start with minerals. Even though I'm a herbalist, I love herbs. But when we're looking at deficiencies, like if I have an iron deficiency, I'm anemic. If I was there's no such thing as like a St. John's wort deficiency. St. John's wort deficiency doesn't cause depression. It just doesn't happen, but it can help with depression. So quite often I always start with my crucial nutrients and my minerals, and then I build on top of that afterwards. So that it's, for me, it's very important. It's where we start. What scares me, and Dr. James is a medical researcher, and he has a book called The Mineral Fix, and he found in his studies that 1 in 3 people have at least 10 mineral deficiencies. So we're not talking about isolated deficiencies. We're talking about bulk deficiencies across the board. My aim for tonight is not for you guys to walk away with a long list of supplements that you need to get. What I want to do is to educate you on why we're so deficient so you can make a couple of changes that are going to impact you across the board. And maybe if there are some symptoms that you're struggling with, maybe a couple of minerals rather than all of them. But just to let you know, this research was people, not women, and it was America. And to be honest, all Western countries are very similar. I wouldn't be surprised if we had exactly the same result. So, what causes us to be so mineral deficient? So, really, when we're looking at modern agricultural methods, these guys, this depletes nutrients, downgrades the soil, and disrupts the water cycle. Plants get their nutrients from the soil, and animals get their nutrients from plants. But if the soil is of poor quality in the first place, we all miss out. Overall, there is a roughly a 30% reduction in minerals in our commercially grown food these days compared to, say, the 1950s. So that's a big problem. The good news is that it's quite promising to see a whole lot of regenerative agriculture coming through. And regenerative agriculture focuses on the soil quality first. So if we have better quality soil, we're going to have healthier plants, and that's only going to be good news for all involved. It's not quite mainstream yet, but there's more farms that are turning regenerative, so there's hope there for the future. So the next thing I wanted to discuss was environmental toxins. Um, Pollutants such heavy metals actually compete for absorption with minerals. Say, for example, if you eat a lot of seafood, you may have high mercury levels from the ocean, and mercury will knock out your selenium and your zinc. We're the lead generation. Yeah, lead-based paints, lead petrol. If we still have lead in our system, or we're still being exposed to lead, lead can knock out calcium. So there's all different interactions, but basically we need to reassess how toxic we are and whether we need to do any specific detoxification, whether it's cleaning up our house or cleaning up our food or actually doing a physical detox yourself. Looking at restricted diets, there are so many restrictive diets around. The FODMAPs is one that, as a nutritionist, I've sometimes recommended, but it's designed to be used for a short period of time to give the digestive system a break and to give it time to heal so that you can then reintroduce foods. But I've seen too many women remain on these kind of diets for too long. And the more restricted your diet, the more depleted you are in nutrients. Next is ultra processed foods. These guys never had nutrition in there in the first place. So you're not getting any there. Then we need to look at the lost art of food preparation. So think about soaking, sprouting, fermenting. These processes reduce the amount of anti-nutritive food substances. So let's take phytic acid, for example. Phytic acid binds to minerals like calcium and magnesium and zinc and iron to create phytates. Unfortunately, humans don't have the enzymes to break down phytates, so therefore these nutrients are lost for us. But phytic acid isn't the only anti-nutritive food component. You might have heard about goitrogens from your cruciferous vegetables that impact on our ability to absorb iodine. We also have lectins that are found in legumes and whole grains, and they interfere with calcium, iron, and zinc. Oxalates are found in green veggies, and tannins in tea and coffee can play around with your absorption of iron. So sometimes we need to go back to what we used to do in the past. So I certainly can remember growing up and my mum preparing dinner like the night beforehand, getting out what are we going to eat and start to soak some things in preparation. We don't have time to go too much into that tonight, but it's worth thinking about and maybe searching and seeing if there's any local fermenting or sprouting sort of classes in your local area. And then we've got the health of the digestive system itself. Things like inflammatory bowel disease, any inflammation in the gut will inhibit its ability to absorb nutrients. Infections like H. pylori can block mineral absorption, and so can certain medications like antacids. So you can see there's multiple reasons why we're deficient and why it is the spectrum of minerals and not one or two. So how do we turn this all around? How do we replete our diet? And look, it really starts with a wide variety of food. You want a rainbow of different colors on your plate. We've mentioned the regenerative food. So, regenerative farming, as well as focusing on soil, is very similar to organic farms in that they also don't use pesticides and herbicides. So, there is some similarities. In Australia, it's easier to find organic farms. So, have a look in your local area. You can use them interchangeably. They will still have more nutrients than your commercially grown foods. Um, we spoke about preparing food. We need to look at identifying and removing toxins potentially. We want to optimize our digestive function so that we can tolerate a wide variety of food, but we also need to make sure we've got adequate acids and enzymes to break food down. Now, balneotherapy might be a new one. I'm not sure whether you've heard of balneotherapy, but it's a fun one. It's a great way to get nutrients in. And this is when we use our skin to absorb our nutrients. So balneotherapy can be bathing in high mineral content water. So think about soaking in the Dead Sea, or at home soaking in an Epsom salt bath. It also can be mud wraps. It certainly sounds like a fun way to a pampering way to get your minerals in. And obviously there's supplementation and infusions. So, guys, all minerals are necessary at all stages of life, but there are a handful of them that I commonly see at this stage of life. And if you know me, you know the first one is going to be magnesium. Sorry, I've just noticed that a chat came up. Would that be the same as magnesium baths in the float setup? Yeah, so that could be if a form of balneotherapy, having a lovely float session, or even at home, you could do it with an Epsom salt bath. All right, getting on to magnesium. So I think of magnesium as the master mineral for the menopausal transition. Data suggests that roughly 80% of the Western population is unfortunately deficient in magnesium. And some of the common signs of deficiency include sweating, think hot flushes, night sweats, headaches, poor stress response, mood swings, sleeping issues. So, sleeping issues was another one that came up before. Muscle cramps, annoying little eye twitches, fatigue, brain fog, elevated blood pressure, bone density issues, constipation, pain of any kind. So, if we're looking at food sources, magnesium can be found in your dark green leafy veggies, your legumes, your nuts, your seeds, your beans, your avocados, bananas, fish, chicken, and beef. But possibly the most popular source of magnesium is dark chocolate. So, another sign of magnesium deficiency is chocolate cravings. So, you can see that one there. Um, yes, so there are also links in there with estrogen dominance. So think about endometriosis, endometrial hyperplasia, fibroids, and polyps. Magnesium is just so easy to supplement with. Like we spoke about the float tank and Epsom salt baths. There are pills, there are powders, there are creams. Um, Magnesium really gives you bang for buck. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions. So it's one thing that you take, but it covers a whole spectrum of different symptoms. But before you run off and buy anything, um, I always tell my women any supplement comes with cautions, contraindications, and interactions, and magnesium is no different. Like if I, in my book, for anyone who's got my book, when I look at, let's open up magnesium, medical interactions, 9 different medication interactions just with magnesium. So it's always worth, if you're on any scripts, ask your prescribing doctor, ask the pharmacist, ask your nutritionist, or your naturopath, and we can always look those up for you. With my book, I have mentioned a lot of them, not because I want women out there self prescribing, but just I want it as a conversation starter. So you have an awareness. So when you are next seeing your doctor, you can say, oh, by the way, I've heard this interacts with that. What do you think? What should I do? But if you're not on any medication, your biggest problem is if you take too much magnesium or if you take the wrong form of magnesium, you're likely to get diarrhea. But diarrhea is short lived. You stop taking the magnesium and your bowels calm down. Depending on how we go for time tonight, I do actually have some research that we can scatter through. So I might start with some of the research, and then if I find I'm running low on time, I might jump through some of it. But here's one on magnesium. They used 400 milligrams of magnesium for 4 weeks, and they found a greater than 50% reduction in symptoms in bothersome hot flushes. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Now, this research was a pilot study, so it's not the gold standard of research, but it's generally something smaller and cheaper that they do to see whether it's worthwhile actually spending the money and doing a double-blind placebo control study. So this one, that looks pretty promising. The other thing I wanted to mention about the research, I'm going to show you 3 different papers. They're all on breast cancer survivors. And they've chosen that particular group because these women were looking for non-hormonal alternatives. So they're a good group of women to try. The next one is another pilot study. And in this one, they used 400 milligrams twice daily. And with this, they found that 45% of the women had a 100% reduction in hot flushes, that 45% had at least a 50% reduction, and 10% had no improvement. This is just a phenomenal result. So then the final one on magnesium I'm going to show you, they overdid it. They used the 1200 milligrams, so a higher dose again. And the problem they encountered, and this was actually the double-blind placebo control study, it is the expensive test, that everyone had diarrhea. And for me as a nutritionist, I would have expected that. More isn't necessarily better. The other thing that I noticed with this test is they've used magnesium oxide. There are so many different forms of magnesium at my disposal. I would only ever use magnesium oxide if the woman sitting in front of me was constipated, because I'm trying to get a bowel movement out of her. It certainly wouldn't be my form of choice for hot flushes, but they still found that the women did have a reduction in hot flushes, but they just said it wasn't viable because everyone was sitting on the toilet. So don't overdo it. But if you have overdone it, just stop. Take a break from the magnesium, and you'll find that your bowel movements will improve. And then if you want to, you can go back on a lower dose or a different product with a different form. Salt. I'm not sure if this surprises you guys or not, but I love salt. Um, and really, I think it has been wrongfully vilified over the years. Like, many still believe a low salt diet is a healthy diet. This really concerns me as the menopausal transition is actually a time of greater sodium needs. If you're having hot flushes and night sweats, or just excessive sweating in general, you're losing salt. If you're experiencing heavy menstrual bleeding, you're losing salt. And some of the signs that your body requires more salt includes muscle cramps, brain fog, fatigue, water retention, headaches, nausea, dehydration, insomnia, mood swings, insulin resistance. And by the way, a salt deprived body is a sugar addicted body, hence the link in there with insulin resistance and weight gain. Does that sound familiar to you guys? It sounds to me very much like the symptoms of the menopausal transition. Um, Other signs include raised cholesterol, triglycerides, lower bone density. And it's a progressive problem because the longer you are experiencing symptoms such as night sweats, the more deficient you're coming, and the more of these additional symptoms you're starting to develop. That being said, if your doctor has told you to be on a low sodium diet, what I recommend you do is read this book and then go back and talk to your doctor. Because I don't know why you were put on a low salt diet. There's so many reasons why that happens. But this is again Dr. James. He's a cardiovascular research scientist, and he went digging through all the salt research to sort of why did we have this thought in the first place? And I've lost my train of thought for a moment there. Sorry, guys. So, what he found was that this started back in the 1900s before medical research was what it is today. And it was just a thought. 5 to 10% of the US population at that time suffered from hypertension. So, they lowered the salt recommendations. And by like the 1940s, we were hoping to see a difference. But what they found instead was that hypertension had gone up. So they lowered the salt recommendations again. And today in the US, it's about 1 in 3 Americans have hypertension, which kind of doesn't make sense if they've lowered and lowered and lowered the salt. Why is the hypertension going up and up and up? So maybe we got it wrong. It's not the first time. Like, think about the low fat diet. We now know how much harm that has done. And really, if you take a global perspective, you would expect to see countries with naturally higher salt intakes to have the highest blood pressure. But we don't. It's countries like Japan and France and South Korea. They consume the most salt per capita, yet they have the lowest rate of heart disease. Food for thought. If you're interested, grab the book. It's a riveting read, but also if you have been told to be on a salt restricted diet, just have a look at some of the research that he found. But do go back and talk to your doctor before adding salt back into your diet. And for me, I tend to use more electrolytes than salt. That way, I'm getting a balance across the board of all of my electrolytes, not just sodium. Um, if you are going to use salt, I just recommend that you don't use table salt. Table salt has been processed. In its natural form, it's a superfood with many different trace nutrients. But after they've processed it, after they've taken out, like they bleach it, they deodorize it, and they add back in sodium and chloride, and in some cases iodine. This is imbalanced processed food. If you're going to add salt to the diet, then in my opinion, it needs to be a natural salt, sea salt or rock salt, something like that. We might skip over that one. That's all bad news. So, K, Kalium, who knows what it is? It's potassium. Often asked why potassium is K and not P, and that is because its Latin name is Kalium. So, it is K on the periodic table. Bit of random fun fact in there for you. All right. So, potassium. It's estimated that about 97% of American postmenopausal women are deficient in potassium, but it's pretty much the same in all Western countries. And some of the leading causes of potassium loss are sweating and frequent urination and heavy blood loss. So they're all things that can happen during the menopausal transition. It is also an electrolyte like sodium, but what I forgot to mention before is when you're looking at the name electrolyte, the electro bit part means that it holds an electrical charge when it's dissolved in the body. And we need electrical activity to beat your heart, to contract your muscles. So it has a really big role in heart health and muscle health. And with heart health, it's good with maintaining blood pressure, reducing your risk of stroke and heart disease, and regulating the rhythm of your heartbeat. And I've even used it for palpitations. So I myself have had palpitations in my transition, and I found that electrolytes, I can take a dose of electrolytes and it'll calm down in like 20 minutes time. So that's something that I found particularly useful. Um, so it's also for healthy muscle contraction and strength. If you're deficient, you can get painful leg cramps. But we've discussed a few things that could cause painful leg cramps: and magnesium deficiency, sodium deficiency, potassium deficiency. And we're going to talk about iron next, but iron could also cause painful leg cramps. So keep that in mind if you're getting woken up at night with those really, really painful cramps. I've had some of those too, but iron is what's the trick for me. But we're all different. There's four things to try if you're experiencing them. Potassium actually combines really well with magnesium for muscular issues. So if you're perimenopausal and you're having menstrual cramps, a magnesium potassium combination could be quite useful for you. I think of potassium as the power pill. That's how I was taught it at uni. It helps with um, energy and just feeling and strength. It's the perfect menopausal transitional nutrient because the three big issues in postmenopause with our bone health, our cognitive health, with our heart health, they're the three big diseases we need to worry about later on. And I found research linking potassium deficiency as potentially being a contributor to those diseases. And so why not top up? Why not make sure you've got plenty of potassium? It's also linked in with bone loss. I think I mentioned that. Oh, yes, and blood sugar and insulin resistance as well. So we do know that we have an increase in the diagnosis of diabetes with postmenopause. So potassium also helps with insulin sensitivity so that you have more balanced blood sugar levels. So I can just see something pop up. Is Himalayan salt okay? Now, I'm going to say yes, but you can find research linking Himalayan rock salt with toxicity. I would say get a quality brand. Probably don't go out there and buy um, a random no name brand. Go and get a good quality, reputable Himalayan rock salt. But yes, I use Himalayan rock salt. I think it's a good option. Oops, sorry. We just had another question came up and I closed it. What type of magnesium do you suggest? Is there many? Yes, there are lots. And I'm going to have to say that's better to ask your practitioner who knows what's going on for you because it depends. Like if it's sleep, cognition, moods, I'd be looking more at a magnesium threonate. If it's more muscular issues, I'd be looking at a bisglycinate. If it's more heart issues, I'd be looking at a malate. It all really depends on what's going on for you. There's no one form of magnesium that is going that I would recommend across the board for everyone. So I would just get a bit of um, someone who knows what's going on for you might be able to suggest a better one. I would just say avoid magnesium oxide unless you're constipated. I hope that's helped. Potassium. My warning was here. If you have been put on a potassium sparing diet, then you need to go back to your doctor and just check with them how potassium sparing do you need to be, because there are many medications that interact with potassium. And things like a banana can have over 400 milligrams of potassium in it, yet some of your supplements might only have, like a multivitamin might only have 20 milligrams in. So in that case, if you haven't been told to avoid the food, then taking that multivitamin is not going to be a problem because you've got much more in your diet. If you're not on a potassium sparing um, diet, then start with potassium food sources. Like, look at these yummy foods. We've got bananas and tomatoes and broccolis and sweet potatoes and potatoes, avocado. Like, these are basically your fruits and your vegetables. Now we're going to move into iron. Now, iron actually changes depending on where you are in the menopausal transition. So let's just start at the beginning. And it is one of the most common mineral deficiencies I see in perimenopause. And that's because many perimenopausal women notice their periods change. For some, it gets lighter, but for most women, it gets heavier or it gets longer, or they have extra days of spotting and, in general, just more blood loss. The most common symptom women notice with iron deficiency is fatigue. And it's generally a fatigue that's not relieved by sleep, but also as a general, it's very hard for an iron deficient woman to sleep because of the restless legs and the painful leg cramps that she can have at the same time. Other deficiency signs, you may look pale, you may be short of breath, you might have palpitations, headaches, dizziness, feel faint, cold hands and feet, and inability to concentrate. So depending on how low you are, you might just be encouraged to eat some more iron-containing foods. Red meat's a really good one, seafood, poultry. There's also smaller amounts in certain plant foods, such as lentils and spinach and beans. Some of you may need supplements or maybe even an iron infusion. But something that I have found out myself through personal experience, I have had the very heavy flooding periods of perimenopause, and I was quite badly anemic, and I couldn't take enough iron pills to get my levels back up. And this was during COVID, and I couldn't go get an iron infusion because all the medical centers were telemedicine only. So I discovered that my compounding pharmacist would make me up transdermal iron cream. And I was having 150 milligrams of transdermal iron, and man, did I feel good. I felt the difference. There was no constipation, no digestive issues, where most iron tablets are 25 milligrams. So to be able to take such a massive dose and not have to worry about constipation and bowel issues, and I felt the difference really, really quickly. So if you are iron deficient, know that if there are any issues with inflammation in your gut, if you've got digestive infections, if you're on any proton pump inhibitors, you're really not going to absorb your iron orally anyway. So it's just another option. Most people are only aware of oral supplementation and iron infusion, but there is that transdermal option in the middle there. The only downside to transdermal iron is the expense. I think I've said that. So on the other side, when you are no longer in the transition, when you're no longer menstruating, um, you can have issues with toxic iron overload because you're not having that release every month. And if you are blood testing, the most important test to look at is your ferritin, which is your stored iron. And the range 30 to 200, but really, I don't want to see it in the triples. I want to see it in the double digits. And what we quite often see at the same time is that your liver enzymes start to rise because ferritin likes to be stored in the liver. Therefore, it can impact on the liver's ability to optimally function. Kind of makes sense. Ferritin also likes to live in your bones. And I think about iron in general, and I think about it outside of the body. And I use the analogy of the rusty gate. And it does the same thing. It rusts inside the body too when we have too much of it. So just as a rusty gate will creak as it opens, so will your joints start to creak. Um, and you might notice that the rusty gate will start to corrode and change shape. And so your bones might start to develop osteoporosis. Rusty gate will open really slowly and get jammed, and so may your joints, and your overall energy level may start to decline. But other indications are abdominal pain, irregular heartbeat, blood sugar issues, depression, concentration, and cognitive issues. Um, I can't think of any more. But if you do have elevated ferritin, the best thing to do is to make sure you get moving because they found that women who are regular exercisers have lower amounts of stored ferritin. Smokers have higher ferritin. Dietary wise, you really want to look at where you're consuming high iron food. And if you do like the occasional steak, look at having a cup of tea or coffee with your steak because the tannins from those drinks will help to absorb the iron so that you don't have to. So there's sometimes these anti-nutrients in food can work in our favor, but most of the time they don't. Um, if you do have high ferritin, you should check your multivitamins and check your supplements just to check that you're not taking in any extra iron than you need to. Alcohol also increases absorption. So does your cookware. So if you have any cast iron cookware, as it's hot, it can increase the iron content in the food. So might be time to get some new cookware. I just noticed I have another question. How is transdermal iron? Yeah, sorry, you do need to get a prescription. Do you? Yes. Yeah, I don't know of any over-the-counter products. And even with the compounded pharmacist transdermal iron, it only lasts 30 days. So I really wouldn't want something that was made in bulk and put on the shelf because there might not be any iron left in it by the time you finally got it. I don't know whether you can just speak to a compounding pharmacist and they can do it, but I know that I've certainly have prescribed I myself. It's a naturopath or a um, compounding pharmacists. I don't think GPs know about transdermal. I think they'll just say take an oral one or go for the infusion. See, it's good that I'm a perimenopausal woman. I've been through it. I can tell you what worked for me. And that was definitely a fabulous find. And yes, I love my compounding pharmacists. I use Kingsway Pharmacy, but there's plenty of compounding pharmacists around the place. Find one that's local to you and have a chat to them. See if they can have a chat to you and make it, or whether you actually need the script, and then go and see a naturopath or a nutritionist. And actually, my sister's a chiropractor. She prescribes it as well. So possibly even a chiropractor. Any allied health might be able to help you there. Okay, back to here. Iron. So here's just some research that says that iron. So when we're looking at this, iron chelation is where they go and take excessive iron away. And when they do chelate and they reduce your iron, it can directly impact osteoclasts. So it can directly inhibit the breakdown of bone and it stimulates osteoblasts, which is bone building, which is amazing. So if you do have high iron, by getting it chelated or getting it removed from the body, it gives the bones a better chance to heal. And herbally, as my herbalist hat on, turmeric is my favorite nutrient for herbally chelating iron. There are pharmaceutical options, but also a really beautiful option is just to donate blood. That way, you've got some of your iron out, but you've also potentially saved three women's life. Um, and I'm actually one of those women that needed a blood transfusion because of my very heavy menstrual bleeds during perimenopause. So if you do donate blood, thank you. You might be saving somebody like me in the future. This is one looking at iron and cognition. What they found here is that when you have low iron, you have cognitive issues. When you have high iron, you have cognitive issues. So just trying to find that nice even balance through the middle for the most chance of optimal cognition as we age. And this is looking at women who had the greatest increase in iron over menopause had the strongest association with increased insulin resistance, and its links into diabetes. So the moral of that story is we want the middle ground. More is not necessarily better. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want the optimal amount in the middle. All right, zinc. How are you guys going? I hope I haven't overwhelmed you, but we'll keep going. So zinc's another really common deficiency. It's what the roughly 50% of us are deficient in zinc. So primary sources of zinc are all animal products, like I think oysters, seafood, but also meats and poultries. There are some in nuts and legumes, but not really as high. We do find that meat eaters have better amounts of zinc than vegetarians. Like magnesium, zinc's very busy. It's involved in hundreds of different enzymatic processes, and we really need it for this stage of life as it helps with hormonal balance. And research has indicated that women low in zinc are more at risk of developing uterine fibroids and having heavier, more painful bleeds. It's also the first nutrient I think of for hormonal acne. Like zinc's really important for skin. I see skin as a brick wall that is the line between the outside and the insides. But it's the same with your mucous membranes inside. Like your skin and your mucous membranes are a similar structure. They both have a zinc molecule as like a brick, and they have your essential fatty acids as like the mortar around the outside. And this is how you build healthy skin. So it makes sense that if there's any issues with skin, zinc can help. So think about hormonal acne, think about stretch marks in pregnancy, rosacea, but also when we're looking at mucous membranes, any mucous membrane dryness, development of things like fibroids, growths within the mucous membranes, think zinc. But most people know of zinc for the immunity. Like after the last couple of years we've had, most of us know zinc helps with immunity. It's also needed for optimal digestive function, for your senses. So your sight, your hearing, your smell, your taste. Think zinc. It's also needed for bones and pretty much every single cell in your body needs zinc. It's pretty important. Here is some research looking at zinc being involved with endocrine balance. So for the perimenopausal women, it's really important for FSH and LH synthesis. And these are like the master hormones that send down messages from the brain to the ovaries to work. And in postmenopause, it's really important for your aromatase activity. So as we age, our ovaries are producing less of our reproductive hormones, and it's more about our conversion of other hormones into estrogen. So our testosterone, our androgens, and this is via aromatase. It's the aromatase activity that converts them and produces more estrogen. So we need zinc for that. Yeah, There's also lots. If there's any practitioners out here today who haven't read this one, this is a really good study to read. Here we go. Zinc deficiency linked in with the development of fibroids. In this particular study, they found they used, I think it was quail, Japanese quail, and these birds naturally grow fibroids. And they had the treatment group and the placebo group. And in the treatment group, they gave these birds zinc. And at the end of their lives, they found that both groups had fibroids, but the treatment group had significantly smaller fibroids. And fibroids size matters. The bigger, the more problematic they are. The smaller, generally, the less problematic they are. So it was nice. It was interesting to see zinc. We're not going to go into selenium today, but selenium's also got very similar research, also using these Japanese quail birds. And they found the same thing, that at the end of the trial, they did still have fibroids, but the treatment group had significantly smaller fibroids. And here's one looking at zinc as a vaginal moisturizer. As I mentioned before, skin, mucous membranes, it's all the same structure. So if you need more bricks, you need more zinc. And this one was a pilot study, which just means that they were just testing it, testing the waters, see what kind of result they got. They were planning a double-blind placebo trial, and then COVID happened. So I haven't actually seen the results. So I'm assuming that they haven't done it, or it's still in planning, or I don't know. But it was really, really interesting. It was just, it significantly improved vulvovaginal symptoms without serious side effects. That being said, if you have zinc at home, don't try this. I don't know what they've used, but I've discussed this with my compounding pharmacist friend, and she wouldn't do it. She just went, I'm not going to compound you up some zinc. She thinks it would sting. So I don't know what they've done to it. So put your zinc back. If you're going to take zinc, it goes in this end, not in that end, until a specific product comes out. A bit of fun for you. This is just one looking at zinc for acne, acne. Okay, well, guys, that has brought us to the end of the presentation. I am going to get over to questions in a minute. I just wanted to let you know, if you've enjoyed my company and you would like to spend some more time with me, it is just a very lucky coincidence that Women's Health Week and my Menopause Makeover Program enrollment just happened to be at a similar time. So if you would like to do some more work with me, you'd like to take control of your health and banish the symptoms of menopause, come and join me inside my Menopause Makeover Program. So it's an 8-week small group program. We look at lifestyle, and there will be a breathwork workshop where we're looking at paced respiration. And paced respiration in clinical trial was found it's around 52 or 53% reduction in menopausal symptoms. And once you learn it, it's free and you can do it anywhere, anytime. So that's something really to consider. We also go through nutrition. So we spoke at the beginning about 6 crucial nutrients. We only touched on minerals, and we only touched on some minerals. So if you want to know about the rest of the minerals, about your vitamins, about your proteins, carbohydrates, fats, all that kind of thing, come to the nutrition section. And then we have some group sessions. There is the option of upgrading your program and having one-on-one consultation, so you get the best of both worlds. Sorry, guys, enrollment's closed tomorrow. So if you are interested, you've got to be pretty quick. So in the lifestyle section, we do stress and stress management, breath work and meditation, music therapy, movement and sleep. And in the nutrition part, I have a nutrition app, which has your meal plans and your recipes. It also has a tracker in there, so you can track what symptoms you're getting and where you're getting improvements and where we need to continue working. We go for guidelines for good nutrition, all those essential nutrients, and menopause superfoods. So that's a favorite of mine. And with the group sessions, we have 4 group sessions. One is preparing for life. We look at your symptoms and setting yourself up for success. The next session is stress management tools with that pace respiration workshop. Guidelines for nutrition is the third one. And the fourth one, we look at what symptoms are remaining and what sort of treatment options do we have if there are any remaining symptoms. And if you like to take the gold program, that also includes 3 consultations with me. But I will warn you, there's very limited spaces left in the gold program just because I need to fit those consultations into my schedule somehow. So when I looked before I jumped on, I think there were 5 spaces left in that one. So you got to be quick. What I'll do is I'll leave the feedback from the last program up there if you want to read it, and I'm going to jump on over to the chat and answer some more questions. So I'm just going to scroll through. Okay, so I was asked about zinc and why zinc is such a big issue. And it's the same thing as I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk about how we need to look at soil quality and how our foods are grown. We need to look at competition. So things like copper will knock out zinc. They will compete for absorption. So it can be a toxicity issue in there. It can be that maybe you're not eating enough zinc containing food sources. So oysters and seafoods, the first one that springs to mind, but there are other zinc food sources. You've asked about zinc food sources. So there you go. The biggest one. There was a research paper that I left out, which is really interesting, was looking at sexual satisfaction in postmenopause. And they used placebo and a control group, sorry, the control group and the treatment group. And the treatment group had zinc, and that they found that the treatment group had greater sexual satisfaction, greater lubrication. I don't remember what the third ones, might be an orgasm or something, but it was, that's interesting. Like we've always said, oysters are an aphrodisiac. Maybe they really are. Maybe it is the zinc from the oysters that's helping with that. Yes, so we've got a question about long COVID. The menopausal transition symptoms are the same as long COVID. How do you know what you're suffering of both? Well, I guess the first thing would be that if you have not had COVID, not everyone's had COVID. If you haven't had COVID, it's not long COVID, it's the menopausal transition. If you have had COVID and you feel it's just something going on with that, there are some tests that we can do just to see what it's likely to be. And even with the treatment, though, there is some overlap between what we would do for long COVID and what we would do for menopause. So I guess as long as you were feeling better, it wouldn't matter if which one it was. Thank you for sharing. You're absolutely welcome. I'm interested in calcium, recommended and stuff. All right. So I'll read you the question. I'm interested in calcium. The recommended levels are so high and hard to achieve without dairy. Do you recommend supplements post-menopause? Now, in regard to calcium, I'm not a fan of calcium supplementation on its own. Like as we've said tonight, with bones, you actually need to look at so many nutrients. We saw that iron was linked in with bone density. We saw that magnesium was linked in with bone density. We need to have a look at all of the minerals. And with food, my favorite calcium food source is actually sesame seeds. You can make tahini, you can chuck sesame seeds over your salad, chuck sesame seeds over your steamed veggies, chuck them in your smoothies. They're so easy to use. I'm not really a fan of dairy for calcium, but if you do want to supplement, please don't get a straight calcium. There are issues with calcium supplementation on its own. What you really want is more of a blended support. So you'll have calcium, magnesium, and other nutrients in there, but please don't forget to also check your ferritin, because if your ferritin's high, you need to sort that out. Zinc and acne. Someone asked me to flip back to the zinc and acne slide. Here we go. And I have 30 seconds left. I did it. So, any other questions? Oh, thank you. Guys, look, talking about minerals is an absolute passion of mine. It's been my absolute joy. And if you like to stay in contact with me, if you've never heard my podcast before, it's Menopause Natural Solutions, and there are 132 episodes. So chances are I've covered whatever's going on for you. There is my book, From Invisible to Invincible. And if you want to, why don't you join the Menopause Makeover Program? And then you get to have small group sessions with me where similar to this, except you've got your camera on and your mic on, and we're all having a big conversation together and discussing what's going on. Um, or you can just read my blog. Sign up to my newsletter if you haven't. That way, I just send out um, weekly information. Yeah, I'm glad everyone seems to have enjoyed tonight. Fabulous. Well, go and enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope to run into you again sometime soon. Bye.